When I was 30 years old, I calculated the day of my own death. I came up with this number by taking a dozen online life expectancy tests, averaging the results, and then figuring in leap years. Then I scheduled the whole thing on my Google Calendar at 12 p.m. on November 6th, 2069, a Wednesday. It was a long time to wait to die, so I passed the time by calculating other things. For example, I calculated that I could get exactly 42 3-millimeter slices out of one 5-inch cucumber, and that I had walked my dog 8,942 times, and that over the course of my life, I'd taken 10,920 antidepressants. My father died when I was 15. I was taken to a child psychiatrist who diagnosed me with major depressive disorder and generalized anxiety disorder. He gave me a prescription for Effexor XR and Wellbutrin XL, 2 drugs that to this day are still not approved for use in children or teens by the FDA. But he said that my depression was genetic. It was predisposed, a chemical imbalance. He said, take these pills, come back in 6 months. We'll find a way to manage you. I didn't bother questioning this narrative. I mean, why would I? I was 15. I was taught to listen to doctors and respect institutions. And when a doctor tells you you have diabetes, you don't question the need for insulin. Well, a doctor told me I had depression, so I didn't question the need for antidepressants. But at 5'3" and 125 pounds, with air resistance slowing my rate of fall by 0.24 meters per second squared, I calculated that it would take exactly 5.58 seconds for me to fall from my 30-story Manhattan window to the cement below. And on that day, compared to the 19,673 days I knew I had left to live, 5.58 seconds felt like freedom. It did dawn on me that this was an odd exercise for someone whose antidepressants were working as advertised. So I dove into the literature. And it turns out we do not have a single randomized placebo-controlled trial that measures the long-term efficacy or effects of antidepressants. What we do have are typically 4 to 12-week trials conducted by pharmaceutical companies, which means that the business that profits from the sale of the drug is the same business that determines how the data is used, where the data is published, and which trial results are published, which means that neither the patient, the prescriber, nor even the FDA gets the full story. Furthermore, unlike measuring diabetes, there's not a test to measure someone's level of depression. The same goes for ADHD, schizophrenia, bipolar, and all the rest. There's not a single practical biomarker, scan, or blood test that can measure or identify mental illness. So how could my doctor have even known I had a chemical imbalance if there wasn't a test for it? This all made me deeply uncomfortable because I hadn't had a single unmedicated moment in my entire adult life. I was a child when these drugs were first prescribed. The decision was made for me. And that decision affected every aspect of my life, from creativity to empathy, even sexual and reproductive health. And here I was learning that there wasn't even evidence to support it. So I talked to my doctor, like the commercials told me to do. And she said that because I was on the lowest dose of Effexor on the market, 37.5 milligrams, if I wanted to stop taking it, I was going to have to stop taking it cold turkey. Now, let me be clear. This was incredibly irresponsible advice. Effexor is notoriously difficult to get off of because it has a very short half-life and a steep CERT occupancy, which is the measure of the percentage of a serotonin transporter that is blocked by an antidepressant at a given dose. But I didn't know any of that at the time. Why should I have known? I was just the patient. But without Effexor XR in my system, my mind began to fill with bloody homicidal visions. I developed an intolerable sensitivity to light and sound and tore the clothes off my back when shirts I'd worn for years became unbearably itchy. I even bent a metal ironing board in half out of rage. And this went on for a year. But at the same time, I was also having these little moments of lightness and joy and wonder that I hadn't experienced in 15 years. Even the way I saw color changed. It was like the saturation slider was turned up on my whole world, and I was desperate to hold on to that color. I needed it. I needed color like I needed air. And so I didn't tell my psychiatrist what was happening to me. I had a deep intuition that if I told her what I was experiencing, she would put me on an involuntary psychiatric hold. This happens all the time. I know because today my work and my book focus on safety prescribing education. So in addition to talking to parents and corporations, I speak to doctors and residents about psychiatric drug withdrawal because infuriatingly, this is not taught in medical school. Without withdrawal-informed doctors, patients run the risk of being misdiagnosed with everything from schizophrenia to bipolar to borderline personality disorder. If that happens, they can be hospitalized, often against their will, where they're forced onto powerful antipsychotics and sedatives, all because they were having a withdrawal reaction to a low dose of a common antidepressant they were told was safe. It has now been 7 years since my last antidepressant, and the suicidal thoughts have evaporated when I got the drugs out of my system, which leads me to wonder if my antidepressants were actually contributing to my depression. And perhaps there's an argument to be made that for a small and specific subset of people, antidepressants could be of short to medium-term aid. But in the 35 years since that Prozac has been on the market, it doesn't take a PhD to look around and come to the conclusion that what we're doing is not working very well. I think that's because when it comes down to it, these drugs are no match for what we all really need, which is love. The death of my father was not about the sudden absence of a person. It was about the sudden absence of love. That's where I got lost, and that's why the depression appeared. And I don't think this is an isolated incident because when I talk to other people and I ask them to tell me their story, without using the word depression, it boils down to a lack of, cessation of, or betrayal of love. Every time. So I think that my depression was trying to alert me to the magnitude of love I was going to need to learn to create for myself in order to make up for the depth of the loss. And that was going to take time, real time. The second that process was medicalized was the second that opportunity was taken from me. But today, the depression, the anxiety are gone, thanks to years of deep emotional work. And thank goodness, because as of today, I have 16,822 days left to live. Maybe, hopefully, because I want them all. I want all the futures I never thought I'd have. Because today, compared to 5.58 seconds, 16,822 days feels like freedom. Thank you.